My name's Joel Fairbrother from Bow River Law in Calgary, Alberta. I'm an employment lawyer, and today I'm going to be answering the question, can my employer lay me off without pay? Okay, so this is actually a more complicated question than it might seem at first. Under the Employment Standards Code of Alberta, an employer can lay off an employee for up to 90 days out of a 120-day period. But that's just under that legislation. That's just under that particular law. There's another law that applies to everyone too, and that's called the common law. So it's a little bit different. So we're going to sort of break this into pieces. The first piece of understanding whether an employer can lay you off is, what is a layoff? A layoff is, I know that commonly people use the term layoff to mean the same thing as termination, but it doesn't mean the same thing. A layoff is something where an employer puts a stop to your work for temporary. It's intended to be temporary. A termination is where it's intended to be permanent. Sometimes people will say that, if they were terminated without cause, like where there's no misconduct, that's a layoff, but it's not. That's still a termination. A layoff is always has to have that intent that it be temporary. Okay, so under the Employment Standards Code, as I indicated, the employer appears to have that right to lay off. But under the common law, any time an employer puts a stop to your wages or your work, the two most fundamental things that an employee is entitled to is to be given work and to get paid for it. When an employer puts a stop to both of those things, which is what they're doing in a layoff, the common law has interpreted that to be what's called a constructive dismissal in many cases. A constructive dismissal is where, although the employer hasn't actually said the words "you're fired," they have effectively terminated your employment. And if you resign in those circumstances, you may be able to sue and claim as if your employment had been terminated. Now, there are exceptions to this. So don't just, if you've been issued a layoff notice, don't just jump up and resign your employment. You definitely need to speak to an employment lawyer first, because there are certainly exceptions, and it's not always considered constructive dismissal. Again, my name is Joel Fairbrother from Bow River Law in Calgary, Alberta, and I hope this has been helpful.